and to support the vision of being self-employed. In order to keep the focus on our program, we ask that you not read from or mention outside literature in your share. Our speaker, and I believe it is Michael H. Could our speaker present themselves?
I'm Michael. I'm a debtor and a successful business owner.
Welcome, Michael. And would you be so kind? I'll finish reading what I'm supposed to read, and then you can let the timer know what time you'd like. Michael has come to share his experience, strength, and hope with us in the specific area of BDA Toolkit and the 12 Steps of DA. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Leah. I am Michael. I'm a debtor and a successful business owner, and I'd like for the timer 5, 5, and 5, please. Thank you to Tom for asking me to speak. As a longtime attender of this meeting, there's something I want to say, and I just, since COVID, we've been on Zoom, of course, and there's just been an incredible amount of stuff to manage to keep this meeting together. And right now there's 213 people on this meeting. And, it's saving my life. I know that. And I just wanted to acknowledge the secretaries, and all the people that have supported them in making the transition to Zoom. But Dirk and Katya and Eliana and Tom have done an incredible job keeping it together, having to be on their toes, having to deal with all the personalities. And I'm very, very grateful for everybody who's helped maintain this transition. It's remarkable to me. And at first it was, I didn't understand how I was going to be able to get my recovery. I'm scared of change in general, but I'll be darned if I don't get what I need out of this, out of going to meetings on Zoom. I was surprised, but I'm very, very grateful that we have this tool. So I just wanted to say thank you to those people. What it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up here in LA. I grew up in a privileged home, I would say, by any measure, and a violent, abusive home also by pretty much any measure. And, seemed like shame was pretty much the only parenting tool my parents had any real facility with in the long run. And yet at the same time, I was, I had a lot of love in my childhood. I was the oldest grandchild of both sets of grandparents. And, as a child, surely all of my needs were met physically, emotionally, I don't know. That's another story. I'll get to that a little bit later. But, my parents both had major debting issues. I was taught how to deal with my mom's creditors on the phone when they called, and if I got it wrong, I got hit. I had saved $125 by the time I was 8 years old from birthday money and Christmas money and that sort of thing. And that was a huge amount of money to me at the time. And I got $5 or found $5 or something, I think. And I went to go put it in my piggy bank with the rest of the money, and it was empty. And I went to my dad and I said, my piggy bank's empty. What happened? And he said that my mom had to use the money, and he basically shamed me for even having any concern about it at all, for even saying anything about that money. And I think that had a pretty profound impact on me and my relationship to money. By the time I was 15, 16, I was living like an outlaw. I started working when I was 10 years old. my dad had a privileged upbringing, and he was very afraid that I was going to be a spoiled kid. So I was put to work, and I went and I sold lemonade on the street. I grew up in an area that had horses. I shoveled horse manure at the age of 10 for 10 cents an hour, gladly. I started caddying when I was 10 years old. But by the time I was 14 or 15, I was living like an outlaw. I was making money in the black market, and I was making a fair amount of money too. I didn't really understand the value of that money. I've never had enough money. I always spent beyond my means. I somehow made it through college. I was basically an anarchist. I would only conform with, well, to say I was an anarchist actually is ridiculous. It's sort of a convenient excuse for not being willing to comply with anything that didn't seem convenient to me. It's a joke for me actually to call myself an anarchist. I was basically just a scofflaw, and I just didn't care about any rules, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And the bottom line with my childhood.
That was 5 minutes, Tom. Michael.
Thank you. The bottom line with my childhood and my early life relationship to money is that I was ashamed of myself. I didn't feel worthy of living a life where I could be accepted in the world, and it created constant fear. And I couldn't apply for jobs. I couldn't apply to schools. The few things that I was accepted at were basically, seemingly almost by happenstance. I didn't feel worthy of having a place in the world. So by the time I'm in my late 30s, my late 20s, I'm bottoming out on money. I'm having to borrow money about once every 6 months. Oftentimes I paid it back. Sometimes I didn't. But always living beyond my means. Always scared that a utility is going to be shut off, or I'm going to be embarrassed by not having enough money for this or that. And that really became the hallmark of my debting, is that I have this really intense fear of being outed as incompetent around money. So much so that I would get suicidal over it. And I got sober, and a couple years into my sobriety, my sponsor suggested that I go to Debtors-Anonymous. And to me, it seemed out of the blue. I was like, what, why would you say that? And we would have occasional conversations about it. I didn't even consider going to DA at that time, but I did that cycle, even after getting sober, that cycle of boom bust, that, having money and then having no money, having the electricity shut off or my phone shut off, and scrambling to get them turned back on, scrambling to pay the rent, scrambling to do this or that, and, overspending in some areas, not spending enough in other areas, earning really well sometimes, not earning at all other times. That all just continued until I was actually in India, and I was fulfilling like this incredible spiritual quest that I had. It was very profound for me, and I was going to have to get a payment from somebody I was working for while I was there, wired into my account, and that employer was usually very reliable, and for some reason it wasn't coming through. The wire wasn't coming through, and it was the day before I needed to pay my hotel bill. I was very, very far from home, and I found myself in the fetal position on the floor of my hotel room, crying, plotting my suicide, again, and all of a sudden realized I had some epiphany, and that was that I needed to go to Debtors-Anonymous once and for all. And I vowed to myself in that moment that as soon as I got back to the States, if I made it back, and that was my thinking, I wasn't sure I could make it back. As soon as I got back to the States, I would go to a DA meeting. And that wire came through that afternoon. I was able to pay my bill in the morning without having to shame myself by asking somebody to borrow the money. I made it back to the US. I slept, I woke up, and I went to the Saturday morning Brentwood meeting of Debtors Anonymous. And I got there and I was broken, and I had been broken for a long time. And I was so ashamed of myself. And I'll never forget being in that meeting and just hearing people share, hearing the speaker share, hearing people share after the speaker shared, and hearing them use terms that I couldn't even imagine existed, that I could completely identify. Just the language of Debtors Anonymous. And I could completely identify with everything I was hearing in that meeting, and both the way people's debting worked and the way people's recovery seemed to me to be working. And I heard a little bit of hope in that first meeting, and my eyes opened a little bit. And so I came back the next week, and I realized pretty soon that, I'd had good training in my other 12-step program, and it worked. A miracle happened, or if not numerous miracles happened for me in that program. So I knew just enough to be dangerous in DA. I actually, that thing people say the credits don't transfer is absolutely my experience.
That's 5. That's 10.
Thank you, Mindy. And I thought that, I knew how to do this. And I soon realized that I needed to let that go. But one thing that I thought for sure is that I needed to get a sponsor, and I did. And, I kind of did what the sponsor said, but he was very gentle with me at first. All he asked me to do was keep my numbers and keep showing up at meetings. And I tried my best to do that. But, a few weeks in, I was broke again. I'm suicidal again, and now I'm starting to take action towards my own suicide. And I realized that I probably wasn't going to be able to take that back if I did it, and I should probably think it through pretty carefully. And I called my DA sponsor, and I told him what was going on. And he said I needed to do 2 things. He said I needed to talk to a mental health professional, and he suggested that I find 2 names, or call through the phone list, which has been an invaluable tool for me. Call through the phone list and find a man and a woman to do a PRG. And so I was desperate, which has turned out to be my greatest gift. I called a mental health professional. He gave me a suggestion. I took that suggestion, and then I started calling through the phone list. The first man I called said he would be glad to do a PRG with me. The first woman I called said she would be glad to do a PRG with me. I did that. I set up that PRG. I did what the mental health professional suggested, and this is just my story, and I share about this because I think it's really important. I'm not saying I have the solution for anybody else's suicidal ideation, but I know that what happened for me is when I started taking direction in this program, my suicidal ideation receded. It went away, and I haven't plotted my own suicide since that time. And for me, that's as big a miracle as there is. That first PRG was one of the most profound things that's ever happened in my life. What was really going on in that PRG is that the 2 people that did the PRG for me valued my life more than I could. And they treated me like I was a child of God. And I did 9 PRGs with them, and that not only saved my life, it gave me a life like worth living. The bottom line was that they gave me a foundation in this program, along with my sponsor and going to the meetings, that showed me that this is a spiritual program. I believe that my debting disease goes all the way to the essence of who I am. It basically goes to my spirit. And that's why, like, psychology didn't work, good finance methods didn't work for me. Nothing I thought worked to resolve my disease of debting. I needed a spiritual solution. I needed for my relationship to finance and the other elements of my debtor's disease to be addressed fundamentally by a spiritual solution. And once I had that foundation of a spiritual basis for my recovery, like a spiritual program of action in Debtors Anonymous, keeping my numbers, doing the PRGs, going to meetings, being of service, you know, when I got to the point where I had something to offer, being willing to take phone calls from people. And I had something to offer in my first week in DA, in my first, you know, like, if I've got 5 days and I'm doing what's suggested, then I've probably got something to offer somebody with 4 days, you know. And being of service in this program has been critical to me. Like, you know, if you're new in this program, really, I'm here to talk to you today. You know, use that phone list. The people that put their names on that phone list put their names on it because they want to be called. They expect to be called. They hoped to be called. I know that's the case for me, and taking outreach calls has been something that has made a huge difference in my life. Being willing to do PRGs for other people has made a huge difference in my life. So I'm eternally grateful for what I've gotten in this program, and thank you for letting me share.